Good afternoon, everyone. We do have a light crowd today. I know a handful of people let me know that they weren't going to be able to make it today, and I know Councilman Goday is he's gonna come in, but he's going to be a few minutes late. So before we get started, I did want to mention, if you haven't heard, Adam Knapp has moved on from BRAC, and he's taken a position with Committee of 100 for Economic Development, and he's with BRAC through the end of the month, through tomorrow. Okay, through tomorrow. All right. So Ann Trappe, who was, as I understand, was the on the BRAC board at one time. I'll let her introduce herself in a second, but so I don't mess anything up. But so she'll be a new committee member, but certainly not new to the topic. Got a very strong background in what we're talking about here, so I think I know she'll come on and we won't miss a beat. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Ann and let her introduce herself. All right, so with that, our topic for today is credits, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna White with Black & Veatch to go over the credit program.
Thank you, Adam. It's nice to be here today. Okay, we want to go ahead and, here we go. If we want to go back a couple slides. There we go. Okay, so some of what I'm going to talk about today, you've already heard. We're going to kind of do a recap on the credit program that the Black & Veatch had proposed for Baton Rouge. We'll talk through that again, and you know, the types of credits and the amount of credit. We'll walk through all that again. But I believe that following, I think it was SWAC 5, I think is when I was here and I presented the same information for the credit program. I think as a result of that meeting, it was requested that we could provide some case studies for you. And so we have 6 case studies that we provided to you in a form of a matrix. So we're going to talk through those, and then we'll circle back again on what we're proposing for Baton Rouge and then answer any questions that you have. All right, go ahead. So just a little information about, you know, kind of what a credit program is for those that are kind of new to this conversation. You know, basically it's a conditional reduction in the stormwater fee if that property conforms with the requirements for the credit. So, you know, basically if a property has a best management practice, a BMP, on their property that helps control either the quality of runoff, so treating that runoff before it goes into the system, or controls the amount of runoff coming off of their property, they could qualify for a credit. Those are the most 2 common forms of credits, quality and quantity. There's other ones that we'll talk about today as well, but that's basically what a credit is. If you do something to help control stormwater runoff, you can get a credit on your bill. They typically apply only to non-residential parcels. It's very hard for a residential parcel to really have any impact on stormwater runoff. You know, having a rain barrel or a rain garden, it's nice, but it really doesn't do a whole lot in terms of helping the stormwater system as a whole. So mainly what we're talking about are credits that would be applicable to non-residential customers. So the benefits of having a stormwater credit, there's both economic benefits to the city, to the system, as it, you know, if it helps control the amount of pollutants that are going into the system, as well as the peak flow going into the system to try to avoid flooding issues. And then there's also environmental benefits as well. You know, there's green initiatives that can be implemented to help stormwater runoff and other kind of facilities as well. So it really benefits the community, both economically as well as environmental. Okay, so just a little bit here about the framework. We'll kind of circle back on this at the end when we talk about what we've proposed for the parish in terms of a credit program. But when we develop a credit program, these are the components that we're looking at. So what are the objectives? What does the parish want to accomplish with the credit program? For example, is there a very specific issue, stormwater issue, that needs to be addressed? And if so, how can we design a credit that'll help address that? The types of credits. There's two very common types. What we're proposing are 5 different types. You'll see when we look at the case studies, some utilities have up to 9 or 10 types of credits, so it can really vary. The types of credits that are offered are very specific for that community to address the issues in that community. Then for each credit, you have to have a technical criteria. So what's the criteria that property owner needs to meet in order to get the credit? We'll talk through that. Program policies. Who do the credits apply to? Can residential get credits, or is it non-residential? What's the application fee? How long are the credits in place before you have to renew them? Those kind of policies. And then the revenue implications, of course, because what we're saying is that if you get a credit, you'll get a reduction in your stormwater fee. That means less revenue for the parish. And so when we consider the credit program and when we consider the amount of credit that will be offered, we need to keep in mind that that's a reduction on revenue. And when we reduce the revenue, we're not reducing the costs that need to be recovered. We have to bump up our rate a little bit in order to still meet those costs with less revenue. Okay, so what we had provided was a matrix for 6 utilities, and it provided a lot of good information. It was a summary of the types of credits that each of those 6 communities provide, the technical criteria, the credit being offered for each of those credits, and the maximum aggregate credit allowed as well. So there's really no industry standards when we talk about a credit program, and you'll see, as we go through these 6, how very different they are. Like I mentioned, one of them has up to 9 credits, another one has 2 credits. So there's no industry guideline that you should have at least 4 or 5 or no more than 6. It's really just what fits well with that community. And you'll see that there's credits as we go through these. Some of the credits are based on meeting regulations, some are based on exceeding regulations, and some are completely independent of regulation. So again, there's no standard. It varies from case to case. So we'll walk through each of these, and then we'll review what we were proposing for the parish. So the 6 communities that we picked out here are all more or less similar in size to the parish in terms of population and square footage. We tried to get as close as we possibly could. So the first one here, Charlotte Mecklenburg in North Carolina. So this is one that has quite a number of credits, total of 6 credits. The most common credits that we see are quantity, so the amount of flow, and quality. And so you'll see as we look through all of these that most of these do have those 2. Those are the 2 most common credits. And so you can see there when we look at that, the stormwater peak, as peak management, that's the quantity of flow going through the system or entering the system, stormwater volume. And then you can see that there's also some that are a little bit specific for this community. So the county line fee credit, and there's I'm not sure even how to pronounce it, Catawamba River fee credit. Those are very specific for that community. If flow is going into one of those 2 areas there, then there's a credit for that. The other ones that you can see on here, peak management, again, that's for the amount of flow going into the system. And then the last one there is also another one. So you can see they have 4 or 5 for the same kind of for the same type of credit in terms of a peak credit, but there's different qualifications for meeting those and different amounts of credits that you can get. There's only one on there that would apply to residential. That's that pond fee credit. I'm assuming that most likely that may be for like residential communities and HOA that has some kind of a retention pond as part of their community. And so that's a credit that would potentially apply there. So Charlotte-Mecklenburg is an example of a community where credits are independent of the development regulations. So in terms of the technical criteria that's required, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual regulations are. So that's just an example there. The maximum aggregate credit for this community is 100%. That's very rare. Basically, that means that if somebody can apply for and be granted enough credits so that they don't have a stormwater charge. And again, you have to be very careful when you're doing that because that's a reduction on revenue. So hopefully not very many parcels would actually get to that point, but you don't see 100% aggregate credit very often. Okay, the second example here, this is Fort Worth. So Fort Worth has 9 different credits. Again, they have the 2 most common, water quality and quantity, but they also have an education credit, and that's something that we've mentioned for Baton Rouge. And so for the education credit, basically, if there's a program in place to provide stormwater education, either in the public or private K through 12 school system, and even, in some cases, like, a library could have the same kind of a stormwater education program for kids, or, or other entities like that cater to kids. If they have a program like that, they could qualify for a stormwater credit. So that's a nice addition. Again, in Fort Worth, like with Charlotte-Mecklenburg, the credits are independent of the development regulations. So you can see in their criteria, there's nothing there that specifically points to what the regulations are, and you have to meet or exceed those regulations for the credit. The maximum aggregate credit for Fort Worth is 40%. So it was 100% for Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Here it's only 40%, which is a little bit more reasonable. Okay, the next example. So this is Kansas City, Missouri. So this one kind of stands out because it only has 2 credits. And one of those credits is a ratio credit. And Kansas City, Missouri is the only place where we've ever seen the ratio credit. The only reason we know about it is because I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, so I was aware of it. Otherwise, we might not even know that existed. Basically, the ratio credit for Kansas City is properties that have a pervious area to impervious surface area ratio of 30:1. Then they get the credit. The reason for that is because, in the Midwest and in Kansas City, there's very large properties, a lot of agricultural properties that have a little house and then a lot of land. And so that's what that ratio credit can help address. It's providing, some kind of a break to those kind of properties that when you have several, 100 acres of land, that runoff is really staying on your property, not entering the system, and therefore that's what that credit is to reflect. The other credit that Kansas City has is the peak management. That's the volume credit that's very common. So those 2 types of credits, the max is 50 for each of them. They have a maximum aggregate of 75%. So somebody could qualify for both of those credits. Okay. What's a little unusual is that there's no credits for off-site retention. So there's no, which is a little unusual. Usually we see that in other communities, but for Kansas City, Missouri, that's not included in their program. The next example is Milwaukee. So they have 4 credits there. A green roof, that's one that we haven't seen in the examples so far. That's for water quality. So if there's, plants planted on the roof that are helping to, with the infiltration of the rainwater, helps clean that rainwater, there's a credit for that. They also have the permeable or the porous paving. So again, that allows the water to kind of go through. Instead of running off your driveway, it can go through. bioswale, and then a wet detention pond. So you can see that Milwaukee has really focused on water quality with all 4 of these credits. The aggregate maximum there is 60%. Each of those credits individually can get a credit up to 60%. So you can see how the Milwaukee credit program is really developed and targeted on what appears to be their main concern is water quality. Okay. The next one then is Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. So they have 6 credits. Again, we see water quality, we see peak management to help control volume. You can see they have 3 or 4 different ones for water quality. They do have one if there's an NPDES permit. That's fairly common as well. You'll see if a property owner has a permit for runoff, then there's a credit. There could be a credit offered for that. And we see here also have the education credit like we saw before. So the maximum credit for any single one of these is 75%. The aggregate here is 100%. So another example of a community where a property owner could actually not have a stormwater charge if they were able to achieve enough credits for that 100% credit amount. Okay, and then the last one is St. Petersburg. So St. Petersburg's kind of like Kansas City, only has 2. One is water quality. The other one is I think is a little more specific for St. Petersburg for flow that's flowing directly into one of their bays. The Boca, I'm not sure I can pronounce this one either, Boca Ciega Bay or Tampa Bay, Ciega, okay. So very specific for Tampa Bay. You can see the max credit for each of those is 52%, and the aggregate is also 52%. Okay, so those were the 6 examples that we had provided, and hopefully all of this information that we just walked through and a little bit more is in the matrix that we provided. If you want to go back and look at the details for each of those credits, you'll have that information. So now let's walk through what we had proposed for the city parish storm credit program. So I'm going to walk through the frame. What I'm going to walk through is the framework that you've seen in the past meeting, but it's based on these kind of utilities examples that we just walked through, and based on conversations that we've had with Adam and his team on the parish's specific needs that we want to try to address with the program. And it's important that we identify the credits and the criteria and the amount of the credits now, because again, this impacts the amount of revenue that will be recovered from the customer base. And so we need to have a general idea now what those credits are going to look like so that Adam's team can kind of evaluate who's going to qualify for those credits, how much revenue could we potentially lose, revenue reduction from these credits so that we can make that adjustment in our financial plan. So the objectives for the parish program was really to contribute to the quantity and the quality of stormwater runoff. Those are the 2 most common credits and most common objectives. But also, provide an opportunity for the public to reduce their stormwater bill by contributing to addressing the issues within the parish in terms of the quality of stormwater runoff, the pollutants, as well as the amount of runoff and the peak flow. Want to make sure that it supports compliance with regulatory requirements. So if a parcel owner has a facility, a BMP on their property, they only get the credit if that BMP is actually working and it's being maintained. So helping to encourage property owners to make sure that they're meeting their requirements and doing what they're supposed to be doing. incentivizing on-site stormwater management. So again, we want to just go back one slide. Yeah. Making sure that people who are trying to make a difference in the stormwater runoff, that we're recognizing that and incentivizing them to do that. And then recognizing any properties that go above and beyond the requirements. You can get a credit for meeting requirements, but going above and beyond is even more. Okay, next. So these were the 5 credits. So we have the peak discharge and the quality credit. Again, those are the 2 most common. We also have the ratio credit. We did steal that from Kansas City. The MPDS credit, that one's not as common, but we have seen that in other places. And then the education credit as well. So each of these credits will have their own specific maximum credit threshold. Each credit requires conformance with identified technical criteria. So for each credit, property owner will understand what they need to do in order to qualify for that credit. Property owners can receive more than 1 credit. The aggregate credit with these 5 that we'll go through in more detail, the aggregate max credit is 40 to 50%. And then all types of these credits are subject to a periodic renewal. So again, you don't get the credit once and you have it forever. You do have to go through a renewal process to show that that facility is still on your property, it's still working, you're still maintaining, it's doing what it's supposed to do in order for you to renew your credit. Okay, so the first one is the peak discharge credit. So this is the quantity credit. This is the most common. Out of the 6 that we just saw, St. Petersburg was the only one that didn't have the quantity credit. The other 5 all have that. So this is offered for volume control and managing the peak rate of runoff off of a property. And this is to help address the flooding issues within the parish, help to manage the conveyance of stormwater through the system, and and support the channel protection. So what's being proposed there for the credit is 10 to 15%, and that's for exceeding the current requirements for retention and detention. Just for an example, for the 6 that we looked at, that credit magnitude ranged from 5% for Fort Worth up to 75% for Northeast Ohio. So a big range there. So 10 to 15% is on the low side compared to the 6 that we were looking at. We need to make sure for this credit that we have, that the parish has clear retention and detention requirements if peak is going to be managed on site. So we need to make sure that the property owner knows exactly what they need to achieve in order to receive this credit. Yes.
Our specific case in Baton Rouge, are we considering this credit for individual property owners that also own a detention pond or part of a detention or a retention pond? Or could we?
I think the answer to that is no, because, well, the way the credit program is being presented, it's for non-residents. So it's only commercial.
Okay, but I see that it's done in other communities where residential property owners that own detention and retention ponds can get credit. Could we, since we're creating this now, could we add that in for that case?
It's certainly up for discussion.
I think that our friends at the, well, they're not here, the developer,
Growth Coalition.
the Growth Coalition, and I mean, I know personally, I'm in my HOA board, and our property, we have property owners that own our detention ponds, and we're fighting with that. Meadow Lee just went through it. There are a number of them all up and down, all throughout the parish, where the individual property owners own all or part of these ponds. And I think that would be huge if we could make that fold that in somehow. And they're all having to deal with it right now, figure out how to dredge it, or they're all filling up, they're all old. In our case, our neighbors had no idea what they were getting into when they bought that property, some of them 25 years ago, and now they're filling up because of developments down the road that have pushed, that are now being filtered into their personal pond. In our case, I could show you what we've been going through in our neighborhood. I mean, our neighbor's detention pond, there's 3 of them that own it, and now all the neighborhoods around feed into that. So can we consider?
Well,
So,
that's up to the committee. I mean, you could, I guess, this was a plan that we put together, that, I guess, as, I don't even know if I'd call it a recommendation, but this was just a plan that was put together. It's certainly up to the committee to modify this.
Sure, that's why I'm bringing it
however
up. Like,
they
can we,
want.
I know that our Metro Council people have heard this from their,
yeah, so Adam, in that example, I don't think that there's any existing subdivisions that are going to qualify for this credit, because my understanding of the way this credit would work is that to qualify, you would need to exceed the current standard, which is the 100 years. The peak is the 100 year. All of our previous subdivisions were developed typically to the 10 year. I think maybe a very few handful got developed to the 25 year. So I'm not sure that existing subdivisions would qualify for that. But my question is, what is the threshold that we would set to say that you've exceeded the current standard, right? So that 100-year standard is already considered to be a pretty high standard. I mean, are we I don't know what the next threshold would be, 250 years or what are we looking at?
Well, I can take my, that would be more of a policy thing, but I've seen in some of the other surrounding parishes, I can tell you, you have to design to where, let's say, either the 25-year or the 50-year meets the 10-year pre-development. So we could do something like that where, so other parishes, they actually make you reduce the runoff from the site when you develop more than what it was pre-developed.
Correct.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that could be the way this would, you're right. I mean, you can't say, okay, well, it's 1 CFS less, so I get.
Right.
I
That
get
doesn't do us much good, yeah.
15%. Right. So we would have to do something like that where we would say, okay, well, if the 25-year post meets the 10-year pre, for example, then you get 10%. If the 50-year post meets the 10-year pre, then you get 50. Something like that. I think you would have to have some set standard so that they would have to meet.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that one? Okay, the next one is the quality credit. So this is for properties that manage pollutants in the runoff. So what we have here, what we were proposing is a 20% max for removing a higher percentage of total suspended solids, TSS, than required. So Fort Worth and northeastern Ohio were examples that also had a similar credit, ranged from 25% to 60%. Here, what we're proposing is 20%. I believe St. Petersburg and Milwaukee were all on the higher end at 50 and 60%. So again, you can see there's a range anywhere from 20 to 60% in the case studies that we looked at.
Is there any indication on what that higher is? If that's what we're looking at, is there a goal? Is there a goal for that higher percentage?
Again, that would be a policy decision that we would make subsequent to this meeting.
Okay.
But similar to the last one, there would be we'd have to set some threshold where it's not just
Right. Yeah. Okay.
0.5% or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on that one? Okay, the third one is the ratio credit. So what we have here is two ranges. So if the ratio of impervious to pervious is 25% or less, then a 15% credit. If it's between 25 and 35%, then a little bit lower, 10% credit. As a reminder, KCMO's credit was 30%, so not too much different from what we're seeing in Kansas City. So this is just, something for consideration. Like I said, we haven't seen this before. It does seem that like in the northern part of the service area, there's more larger properties, more agricultural properties, and so this would be an option that might be taken advantage of by those properties.
But that could be residential then too. Because a lot of these properties in the north, rural areas are residential. Well, if you can consider them residential, they have a house on a large property. And a lot of people have asked this question about that. Why am I being compared to a neighborhood when I have 30 acres around my house that must surely contribute less?
And the properties in the northern part of the parish that we were looking at, they're actually classified as agricultural. So they would fall under this credit. They're not, most of the ones that we had looked at.
Okay.
Is it agricultural falls under non-residential in the classification, so.
Yeah, there's an agricultural / rural classification in our zoning districts. Okay.
Okay. All right, the fourth one, the LPDS credit. So this is for properties that have an industrial discharge permit for direct discharge. So a 10% max if they have that permit and they're in full compliance with the permit. We saw similar permit credits allowed for in Northeast Ohio, that example, as well as Fort Worth.
Why would you give a credit to somebody that's meeting their permit by law?
Right.
I didn't hear what you
Discharges
said,
that
sir.
are going directly into a water body and not through the parish system.
Yeah, I know, but they're required by law to meet those NPDES permits, huh, or LPDES permits.
Well, and the credit is to recognize that they're not entering the parish system, they're going directly into a water body.
What? So if they're not entering our system, why wouldn't we give this a 100% credit? If we're not handling their water.
But we are. They're probably going into one of the other tributaries in the parish, right?
Well, in many cases, they're going directly into the Mississippi River, which is not
Okay.
part of it.
This
So
is more, that's talking more industrial kind of.
industrial
Okay. All right.
clients. But I get to answer your question, it's going back to, even though that particular piece of property goes directly into the Mississippi River, for instance, they're still using the infrastructure to support their industry. And they're still, while that, most of it may not go to the MS4, they could have an entranceway up front that goes, that's a roadside ditch or something like that. All their employees every day are using the infrastructure to get there. So that was the thought behind not giving a full credit. And again, these are, all of these are, you can move them around however you want. I mean, if 10%, if the thought is, hey, it ought to be more than 10%, that's a possibility, with the understanding that the more credits you give, if we need a dollar amount, then whatever credits we give, we got to get that money back somewhere else. So it's going to go to the residential customers. It's going to, and then it's going to fall on everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna guess it. This thought is not to be put on the system. The only thing you can have is the or if you choose. You don't, you choose to understand what you say. So you're not burdening
That's, right, and then, and again, and it's, I think most of the ones that we looked at, they're all, I don't think we have any others that are direct discharges that aren't going to the Mississippi River. Do we? We don't have any. If you don't mind, if you could turn your mic. So if everybody could turn, I know, so we can hear you, but if anybody's listening at home, they can't hear because it won't go through the sound.
I can't, okay.
There we go.
Chemist and not an engineer. It's not just Mississippi, it's any water of the U.S. when you have an NPDES. Even if it
that's
goes
fair.
into a ditch that eventually goes to the Mississippi, you still are required to have an NPDES.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then the last one is the education credit. So we saw this in a couple of these examples that we looked at. So what we're proposing is a 15% max credit for, like as I mentioned before, public or private K through 12 school or similar entity. If they provide a stormwater education program, they could apply for the credit. Okay. Some of the administrative policies that need to be considered along with the credit program is the, eligibility. Does this program apply only to non-residential parcels, or are we going to have a piece of this that residential properties can also apply for as well? Making sure that we identify that criteria for who can participate in the program. An application fee, a nominal fee, we're thinking $150 for a new application, and then maybe something around $100 for a renewal, because there is, amount of effort required on the parish's part to, take in the application and confirm all of the information and confirm that that property does in fact qualify for the requested credit. Documentation. Once the credit program moves forward, there'll be a credit manual that will be developed that will list specifically all of the different types of documentation that may be required and may be accepted in order to qualify for the credit. That will all be identified and put in writing. Examples would be, maps detailing the drainage site, connection points to the parish system, construction design, like as-builts and things like that. So I think pretty typical information that property owners should have on hand if they have these, BMPs, these facilities on their property, but that would all be laid out very clearly. Credit duration, anywhere from 2 to 4 years, mainly. The reason why there's a duration and a renewal is because, the parish wants to make sure that if it's a facility that received the credit, there's a BMP on the property, a retention pond or something, that it's still there and it's still working. So it's not you just get the credit once and you get it forever. You still have to confirm that you're maintaining that facility and it is still there. And then credit termination. So if somebody does not comply with the credit program, if they're not maintaining that facility, then their credit could be terminated.
Is there an approval step in this thing for the administrative portion?
So typically there is. What we've seen in other communities, there's a board that reviews the applications and make a decision to move it forward, and then whether it's the utility director or commissioner, someone like that would make the final decision. And then there should also be a process if the property owner wants to counter, if their application was denied, if they want to,
An
have a
appeal
discussion,
process.
to resolve that. There'll be a process for that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of that information is outlined in the manual. Yeah. So next slide. So eligibility, what we're proposing that initially it's limited to non-residential properties only. When we talk about residential credits, as I mentioned before, we're talking more along the lines of rain barrels and rain gardens. And while that's really nice, and a lot of people just like having those on their properties because they look nice, they don't do a whole lot in terms of managing stormwater runoff or quality. It's something that in the future, if you want to add that residential piece, a lot of communities do that. Sometimes it's just in the form of giving away $50 vouchers for rain barrels, or a certain amount of money to have a landscaper come out and help you design a rain garden, something like that. But most of these credits that we're talking about today, a residential customer would not qualify for those. Again, the properties have to make sure that their BMP is functioning, they're maintaining it. And then, like I said, maybe residential credits in the future. So in summary, the credit program is just one piece that needs to be considered when we're looking at all of the needs that the system has to meet in terms of, operation and maintenance and managing the infrastructure, meeting regulatory compliance. The credit program is kind of a tool in the toolbox to help the parish achieve those. But we have to consider, on the other hand, that the more credits we offer, the less revenue is generated. And so we have to find that balancing point between encouraging the community, to do what's right for the system versus it's going to impact the revenue a little bit. So I think, yes.
Yeah, just one question, and I guess I have to ask this based on the northern part of the parish draining significantly through Southern University. Okay, we have a significant amount of water runs through there. Right now, we're going through a $35 million project to prevent erosion because of the amount of water flowing through there caused significant damage to property and even threatened some buildings. So I know that we had basically a 10% educational credit due to providing information to students and the community or what have you. Is there any consideration for like and kind benefit? Okay, because there is a significant benefit to the drainage issue coming through the university, and because there's a large area of impervious area, I think the Board of Supervisor Administration would like to discuss some consideration just because of the amount of water that goes through the campus heading to the Mississippi River.
Right, and I think that these credits can be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. If one of them doesn't specifically meet a certain situation, I think that Adam and his team would consider case-by-case as well.
That's fair. Put you on the spot on it.
Yep.
Are you aware of any, like what he's talking about? So he's
Yeah.
right, Southern University is right on the Mississippi side of it. There's a large upstream area. Are you aware? Some kind of way somebody's filtering a large amount of runoff through their property. Significant capital improvement. That's
Yeah, I'm not of any I'm not aware of any specific. You're almost used to seeing Prabha standing up here. Prabha's our stormwater lead. She could probably give you 4 or 5 examples. So let me talk to her, and we can provide that information to you. But I'm not aware of any.
We're going to have that discussion. We understand what we're trying to do here. But like I say, it's $35 million project that really we had to shut down part of the campus at one time and have an alternate road because of just the amount of erosion that was happening by the flow of water going through the campus. So we've been more than happy to sit down and speak with you guys about it. Not a problem.
Okay.
When Prabha, one of the previous meetings, Prabha and I actually had an offline conversation, not exactly about that, but about something very similar. And she cited the example of Philadelphia and the universities. There's 3 or 4 universities in Philadelphia that are all paying into the stormwater program, and she mentioned that there was some questions very similar to this. I don't know exactly, but you might want to check into that. There are 4 universities in Philadelphia, and they all pay in, but they all have some sort of credit. Yeah.
And I'll see what we can find on that and write something up for you, okay?
I'd like to reiterate something around the peak flow, peak management credit. And it has to do with when you look at some of these legacy neighborhoods that have been around for 50 years, they have no retention or no capability of reducing the peak flow. But most of the ones who were in the last maybe 10 to 15 years all have retention ponds. And most of those are part of HOAs, which in themselves common elements, and they're nonprofit corporations. So do they fall under the residential, or can they be considered as part of non-residential for the purpose of those detention ponds and making improvements and getting credits?
I don't want to say that the HOA is a non-residential.
So the
parcel.
HOAs own most of those, Ed?
The retention ponds are common elements of an HOA regime.
Okay.
HOAs are nonprofit corporations.
Right.
Okay, so do they fall under the guise of residential, or can they fall under this other non-residential kind of thing for the consideration of credits? Because quite honestly, those areas do more to help reduce the peak flow than all of the legacy neighborhoods that have no kind of controls in place.
I think they fall under residential, but again, I think it's up to this committee, and if you wanted to say, hey, we want to block those out and make it to where those fall in, there's not an issue
I
with
think
that.
we should say that, and if we
And-
need a motion, we need to say it, and I think it's whether the HOA owns it or the individuals, because in my experience, what I'm dealing with, individual property owners own the ponds.
And
So I think they should be able to apply, because I agree with you. It does a lot to, not only that, we get all the litter that comes down from the shopping center and everything around, and we clean that up out of the pond.
And I think this goes along with, we were having a conversation before the meeting started about the quality credit, and I'm gonna get back on the quantity in a second, but so you've got a lot of shopping centers, that type of thing, that have the mechanical separators right now that may or may not be maintained properly.
They're
right?
offline, most of them.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
The hydrodynamic separators, yes.
correct.
There's 200 of them, right?
Uh,
That's what our
at least.
research showed. There's 200 of them.
And we've got them all mapped now,
Yep.
or the ones that we know of. But you'll see right now that this quality credit, it's for exceeding the treatment, and it's a 20% max. Well, one thing that we could put in there is, hey, if you have one and you maintain it,
That's right.
maybe you get a 5% credit.
Yeah, agreed.
But you have to renew it. That might not be a 2 to 4 year renewal. That's an annual renewal.
To make sure they're having it empty.
Correct. And it does a handful of things for us, because it's part of our permit to get information from them.
Yes.
Okay? So we could give them a financial incentive, if you want to call it that, to do 2 things: to maintain it properly and to get us that report on an annual basis. So that was something we kicked around. So piggybacking off of that, you could say, hey, if the HOA is maintaining the detention pond properly, when it does silt up, they've got to make sure it's being cleaned out, that type of thing. Then maybe you offer a smaller credit for just maintaining what you've put in. 'Cause
That's fair.
like we've been talking about through this whole process, it's one thing to put the capital investment to it. It's another to maintain it, to make sure it works the way it's supposed to.
That's right.
So you could that would be, again, you're giving them a financial incentive to make sure their system is working as it was
It's
designed.
maintained. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I agree to that, don't you?
One problem with that is that the homeowner is paying the fee. The homeowner pays a fee to the HOA to maintain the pond. The HOA doesn't pay a fee to get a credit on. The homeowner pays the fee. So how do you determine that the HOA is the entity unto itself to get a credit?
Well, I think the ones we're talking about is where the pond is on
It's
community property, common property, whatever the word is. And so the HOA owns the pond and is responsible for the pond.
The
And-
HOA is going to pay a fee for any common elements that it owns on behalf of that neighborhood.
Which, if their fee goes up, then it's going to go back to the residents
That's right.
of the
Okay.
neighborhood.
Any
So
cost
it's in-
saving is, yeah, results in lower fees or not raising the fees, right?
Right.
Rather,
Right.
yeah.
But there's other things that you could also do from a water quality standpoint with detention ponds around aquatic planting and stuff like that to reduce the amount of probably the worst violation is probably in pesticides and stuff, or fertilizers rather, not pesticides, fertilizers that come off all the lawns in the neighborhood go into that pond. You could probably do some stuff there. So that should be maybe an incentive to incentivize that kind of quality stuff.
That could,
So is this the time to recommend that we add that in, or what is the time to do that?
well, I guess, are there any other questions on what was presented?
So just an administrative question around this. So those maximums, your team that evaluated would give some kind of a percentage. So you can get a maximum of 10. So you would review this thing and say, okay, this is only worth like a 5% reduction. That's sort of what the administrative review would be?
The way I envisioned it was that if y'all say, hey, we're good with these 5 credits with some modification, whatever those are, then we would go back and say, okay, how would we actually determine whether or not that credit was met? We would put some guidelines in place. We would get it back out to you guys, and ultimately the committee would bless it or make recommendations for revisions, that type of thing.
But fundamentally, it's not 0 or max. Your process, you would have some kind of graduated system in your review. Is that correct?
For most of these, if you look back at the case studies that I showed, there weren't ranges of the credit for each type of credit. It was a set amount. So a lot of the ranges that we're showing here is to kind of give you an idea where you want to set that. We would advise somewhere within this range. So we weren't necessarily saying that every credit should be a range. I think there are some that could be a range. For instance, if you exceed requirements by this amount, you get this credit. If you go above and beyond at this level, that could be a higher credit. But most of the ranges were really kind of just to give you an idea of, it could fall somewhere within that range for a policy decision.
I don't have any problem with the listing of credits. I know we talked about a consideration, a special consideration. Should there be a category that addresses that can be pigeonholed into any of the outlining credits?
I think that could be a sixth
Okay.
option for that.
Sure.
And all of these have to be applied for, so it'd be the same thing, that you would just have to apply for it, and we'd have some, we establish some maximum.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions?
I'll ask a question. I'm not sure you have the answer because it's sort of stepping way ahead. You don't have any idea about, given those credits, say we'll implement those, around how much that's going to cost or how much credit that's going to be?
We do.
Okay.
I can go pull up my laptop and I can get that out for you. But yeah, yes.
Okay, good.
Sarah did that.
Yeah.
That is amazing work.
Yeah.
So y'all took the top 100 and then you projected how much credit there might be from the top 100? Is that how you did it?
Projected the credit, for the ratio credit, it was easy because we had the impervious to non-impervious area. For the peak the first one, the peak discharge credit, that one was kind of hard to quantify. We just kind of looked at what other cities had and assigned that percentage. I think it was like 30% would qualify for that. And then education credit was just based on the schools in the area and the park.
The big file is to take.
Well, yeah, it's important because it's basically saying, okay, how much do we have to adjust everybody else's that is residential?
Right. Kind of like a mini version of the ITEP credit, huh?
Yeah, don't go there. Or EDD.
Yep.
Look at Rowdy, he's just sitting there grinning.
Come on, Rowdy. Welcome. So while y'all are looking that up, the goal here today is to make the recommendation, yes? For those assembled here to make the recommendation?
Well, that'd be ideal.
Yeah.
But
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? Are you
I guess
comfortable
we
with
understand.
those assembled here making the recommendation? I mean, we have some big dogs that are not here, like Breck and LSU. Like, how do we, have they talked to you offline?
I have not spoken to anyone offline,
Okay.
no.
You can bring an
So
alternate.
we don't know what they think or where their heads are.
They had the ability to bring an alternate.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
I think directionally, the question has to be, does this look about right for credits for this parish? And then you guys still have a little bit more work to do to flesh out the details on it, and the devil's gonna be in the details.
Absolutely. And again, and you brought it up, it's whatever you give in credits, you gotta get that back. So whether it's the low end or the high end, there's some, however many cents, you gotta go up on that billing unit to get the rest of that back.
So
I
East
get- I-
Baton Rouge Parish Properties has the biggest nut here. Whether you have option 1 or option 5, do y'all intend to apply for credits?
I don't see where we would.
Which one are you looking at,
It
Kelly?
says number
No.
1, parcel examples, East Baton Rouge Parish Properties.
I don't see where we would, we didn't include ourselves
Okay,
in
good.
credits.
Just wanted to know. What are we dealing with here? Where do we start? Mhm.
From all the credits, we estimated it'd be about $850,000 if we did industrial credits only for each of those things. That was at 26 cents.
But that's at the just environmental compliance, it's $850,000.
So that would be option 1.
So that's
Yes.
option 1.
850. What is it at option 3? Sorry.
She'll go do some math. I guess going back to it, either way, where we plan to leave off today was that we would take a break for the holidays and possibly, reconvene in February, March timeframe. Okay, assuming that
Without a recommendation?
if we didn't have a full recommendation. Now, again, going back to the credits, if y'all say, you come to us with a recommendation today of 5, sounds like there's going to be a recommendation for a 6 credit, but hey, here's we want to move forward with these 6 credits, then we could go and do a little more homework and tell you where we think we would land with those 6 credits. We would establish some guidelines within some of the credits that we would need to establish so we would know whether they get the credit or not. And then we would send that back out to everyone. And then we would need to have that agreed upon at some point as well.
Adam,
Yes, sir.
seems to me if Black and Beach has gone to all this trouble, analyze all these alternatives to come up with the 6 for the city parish, they are the experts on the subject. This is their best estimate of what we need to do. And we've all agreed that we do need credits, because there are a lot of folks here that would be hurting without the credits, and do require credits. If we go ahead and make a recommendation to approve these 6 credits for the parish, your office is going to work out the details on how they're going to be applied and how they're going to be managed. And we can go ahead and get these credits approved now, move forward with that, put this behind us, and leave the details to you for the next meeting.
Well said.
And I think, Kelly, do you want to, I think I heard earlier, you want to add some things to allow?
Well, I just want to
for-
make sure that the retention ponds and the detention ponds are in there somewhere.
Okay,
That
So-
would-
so
are you
whether
good with-
the-
Everybody good with that?
If they can work it out, yeah.
Yeah. If
So
you can
whether
work it
the-
out, yes.
okay, so whether the HOA is just deemed a non-residential, or we just say, you know what? If it is residential, those residential pieces qualify. However the detention ponds get in there,
That is
just
what
get
I
them in there.
believe, because from what I've seen, and I know Ed's probably the same, those detention and retention ponds are huge in our neighborhoods in helping with flooding issues, and they're huge, and they have to be maintained at a cost. Whether it's the
Right.
HOA or the person that owns it, they're helping us. So I think that they should qualify, yes.
Okay, I think.
And that's why
Go
that
ahead.
6th category that we talked about, that may not, anything be pigeonholed into it, there need to be a 6th credit category that can talk about things that may not fit directly. into it.
That's a good point too. Maybe it just falls in there.
Right.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm just I'm not opposed to having a credit for an HOA, but I want to make sure that we understand what we're discussing or what we're expecting an HOA to do to get a credit. So if it's, for me, if it makes sense to reduce total suspended solids with some of those hydrodynamic separators, that makes sense. But I don't know that we can give a credit for just normal maintenance of a detention pond. I mean, I'm open to feedback, but what's y'all's thoughts on that?
That's required by the regulations.
Right. So
It
my
is.
question is, what credit is an HOA applying for other than number 2, a quality credit? What credit would they be applying for?
Well, I guess it would go back to
Quantity and quality.
the peak discharge credit, but
Yep.
maybe it wouldn't be, and again, these are my numbers, it's just maybe it's a 5% for just doing what you're supposed to be doing. Because there's a lot of people that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing now, so it would give them a financial incentive to just maintain it properly.
So we may give a credit for just normal maintenance of your detention pond.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And then
That makes sense.
similarly with number 2, we could potentially give a credit for just maintaining your hydrodynamic separator. It could be, it would be much smaller than the 20%, but, and again, those would be, hey, you got to give us your report annually. So it would be a financial incentive to maintain it properly and then to give us the reports that we need anyway.
Gotcha. Okay, I like it. Thank you.
So I think the motion is to move forward with the 5 credits that we have, to add a 6th credit
Yes.
for
Unusual circumstance.
specialty, I don't know, we'll figure out a good name for
What he
it, but,
said.
yeah, I think he had a good name for
What
it,
he
I
said.
don't remember what it was, but,
What Ken said.
right, but
Yeah.
add a 6th for anything that does not fall within the current 5. That would, in most cases, would be up to the applicant to propose to us what they are applying for, and then add in detention ponds in some form or fashion in residential subdivisions, whether it's through item number 1 or through item number 6.
Detention, retention, whatever we're calling them this week. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second.
I'm gonna add, sorry, I'm gonna ask a couple of questions, and
Okay.
forgive me if y'all went over this and it's because of my tardiness, and I'm sorry about that. An HOA would get a credit from paying what? How would an HOA be charged? What impervious area? What is their stormwater fee? What are they getting a credit from?
For their, whatever their stormwater fee would be for their common area. So they could have a stormwater fee for, if they've got a playground, that's common area, it's gonna have some impervious area to it. They may have,
If it's HOA
Some-
owned,
if it's HOA owned.
Okay.
And then typically the
Okay.
detention ponds, retention ponds are owned by the HOA. It's
But not
common,
all.
it's
'Cause in my
common,
neighborhood, it's the end of, we.
Yeah.
property
Yep.
owners, yep.
Right.
It's common elements.
I
Right.
have encountered that in a few subdivisions where it's property owners. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
right, but I guess in this, and I don't think I think we're saying however they are owned, if it is
Okay,
property owners as well, then they would get
Okay.
that
They could come
benefit.
make the case to you.
They could
That's
come
a
make the
special
case
circumstance.
as
Come see,
well.
please, come to my neighborhood. I want to show
But
you.
in the specific case of the HOA, in most cases, the HOA is responsible for maintaining that pond.
uh-huh, okay. Okay, I'm gonna take a step back. Can you remind me, have we made a recommendation on a fee structure?
Currently, we are at tiered residential, and then we are at individually calculated for non-residential.
Okay,
No.
we haven't set a rate? What's the term I need to be
The
using?
rate that is currently,
For a level of service. We haven't set the
we
rate
haven't,
for a
we
level
haven't
of
set
service.
anything beyond the minimum for compliance,
Okay,
Which is option 1.
which is option 1, which is 26 cents per billing unit.
okay. I'm wondering if we as a committee should look at all of our options on a matrix.
They're right here. They're right.
They're here. Where am I missing? It's been there.
It's in your
Okay.
packet.
It's a really smart idea, and y'all apparently thought of it before me, so. Got it. Oh, you mean this is,
Option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
and
This
what
is
each of these would
what it
pay?
would cost.
Understood.
Yeah.
From what they would be paying standpoint. Okay, I meant more so what recommendations this committee needs to make to get to what a stormwater program would look like. Let me pause because I'm kind of thinking out loud right now. The only thing we haven't recommended is a level of service. Am I accurate in that?
Level of service, and then if you want to add capital projects to the fee as well.
Okay.
Well, in the last couple meetings, I mean, we've gone from meeting 1 to meeting 8 now. We've gone from, this being presented in the first 2 meetings to go into, we only want minimum, to we want the Chevrolet, we don't want the beat up Volkswagen. We were somewhere in the middle to, at one point Larry said, let's try to put everything in there. we can while we have the opportunity. And I think we settled back down on a minimum, or a middle ground, not the minimum. The minimum, option one, was barely gonna make a dent. And I think we said, let's get something firm, let's have something to show for this. That's where I think we left off, right?
Yeah, we agreed that we need to do something to address quantity. If we don't address flooding, this is a wasted effort.
Right. So bare minimum wasn't gonna cut it.
Can we then, thank you, you're helping me organize my thoughts. Can we then make a recommendation on credits without knowing what that impact would be financially? Can we make a recommendation for how much will be credited if we don't know what the impact is going to be on the overall program, the fiscal impact on the overall program?
You just told us what it would be for option one. You said
Right.
it would be $870,000. That's for the minimum level of service, right?
850, but
$850,000,
yes.
excuse me. $850,000 would be the impact on minimum level of service option one.
No, that's not what,
That's what I heard.
Yes, sir.
option one on here is not, I thought that was just the compliance only, right?
It is.
Yeah, that's
but the-
minimum
the
level of
eight-
service.
The
For
850,
compliance.
Okay.
so the estimated credits that we're at right now, which is, it's high level, but it would be $850,000.
Right.
We would have to make that up.
I just want to make sure that we're using the same nomenclature here. Compliance only was the MS4 administrative stuff. Minimum level of service for maintenance, right? Recommended level of service maintenance. Then we had a $200 million and a $300 million capital project. Weren't those the 5 levels that we've been talking about? I think that's, Rowdy's asking the same thing. We've had so many different iterations of this thing. We need to sort of come to agreement that this is what we're going to propose. And so which is the one we're picking? I'm looking back at the last meeting.
Yeah, meeting 7, yeah.
I'm gonna pull up you may have it. I'm gonna pull up the presentation from the last meeting.
Yeah, that would help. So we can all have the same terminology when we're talking about what each option includes.
So I believe the way it is, option 1 is compliance only. Option 2 is 200 million in capital and minimum compliance. Is that right? Let me pull up the, what's the,
Well, we had minimum level of maintenance service, 19 million.
215, yeah.
We had recommended level of maintenance service, 29 million. And we had $200 million worth of CapEx. And then 300 million, right?
let me find the, okay, yeah, so it's, option 1 is compliance only. Option 2, where the billing unit is 85 cents, that is compliance only and 200 million in capital. Option 3 is, which is $1.10 for a billing unit, that is compliance only and 300 million in capital. Option 4 is compliance, minimum level of service, and 200 million in capital, which is $1.30 per billing unit. And option 5 is compliance, recommended level of service, and 200 million in capital. So that's $1.65 per billing unit.
So there's no 300 million in that one then?
No, sir.
Okay.
Now we can look at that. but-
No, I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page with the nomenclature of what's in there.
Yep. So that's how they're separated out right now.
So state those again quickly.
Okay. So option 1, 26 cents per billing unit. That is compliance only. That is what's currently approved or agreed upon.
Right.
Option 2, compliance only with 200 million in capital. That's 85 cents per billing unit. And that's the rest of the numbers I'm about to say, that's all in 2035. Okay, because remember, it ramps up from whenever it starts till 2035. Option 3, the $1.10 per billing unit. That's compliance only and 300 million in capital.
There's your 300 million.
Yeah, I thought I heard that.
Yeah.
Option 4 is $1.30 per billing unit. That is compliance, minimum level of service, and 200 million in capital. Option 5 is compliance, recommended level of service, and 200 million in capital.
Okay. That helps.
I'm sorry, $1.65. I'm sorry. Thank you.
How much in capital?
The fourth and the fifth is 200 million.
Has anybody met with Exxon directly about this?
No, ma'am.
I mean, yeah, I think somebody needs to. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's right back to, yeah. That's what, in other communities that they do, they sit down with the top 10. One-on-one.
Is it easy as take it?
Okay, so back to Steve's recommendation or his request that we approve the credits, or can we proceed with that? Based upon what he said, which I agree with, that Black and Beach has done years of work on this to recommend, based upon best practices, what they think works best for our community. And we've come up with 6 now. Can we proceed with the credits?
Yeah, what other information do we need to make this call
Not for the credits.
for the credits?
No, I don't think we do. We agree that the credits are customary and
I
reasonable.
think the credits are necessary, and we have all the information we're gonna
Yeah.
get on it.
Can we at least agree on that?
I agree.
Thank you. And then is this group ready to vote on an option? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So we made a motion and agreed on the 6 categories. Is that what I just heard?
I think, but that was
Yes.
kind of a,
So we'll make a motion to
Not too
agree on the
exciting.
6 categories as we
not a very
said.
exciting agreement.
Well, I think
Who's the most-
what
Yeah,
Councilman
sure.
Gode asked if we were ready to make the decision without knowing what it was going to cost for each.
Well, I mean, you've got an idea. You just told us that it's, for option 1, it's $850,000. I think you could back of the envelope kind of figure out. You're doing that right now?
That's
Okay,
what
we'll
that's what
wait.
I'm
Can we
doing.
go to the bathroom
So
while you do that?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Where's that number coming from, 850? Is it in the chart that
It, Sarah looked at, so for instance, the schools, we just assumed that the schools were going to apply for and get the education credit. So whatever the schools, whatever their fee was, we applied the education credit. There's others that are harder to predict, so we just used a percentage that's an average of what's done in other places. So it's a it's an estimate at this point.
Is it the sum total of the spreadsheet we have? The sum total is just not on the spreadsheet? The sum total of all of these costs from the 3 pages? From
I'll let Sarah answer that.
Like, I add up all of option 1 and it equals to 850? Do I have it? Where's the 850? Okay, it's not on there. Correct, okay, that's what I'm trying to get to is, where's the 850 come from? It was estimates y'all made, but we don't see those numbers.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, you don't
Okay.
have that information.
Those numbers would be taken off of that bottom line number, is what you're saying.
Correct, and then you would have to, so if the billing unit is 26 cents, then it might need to be 30 cents to make up for the credits that you're given the other.
There's the rub, 30 for
individual.
residential.
Well, and it'll go up for everybody, but yes,
That's,
other people, again, if you need a fixed amount of money,
that's right.
then
You gotta make it up somehow.
you gotta make it up, and that's how it's gonna work. And we can, we know how many billing units we have. Okay.
That's where my comfort level decreases. Making the,
Right.
I'm fine recommending the credits. I think it's a relevant and necessary program. But we don't yet know what that
mentioned that. That's a
impact
good
is gonna
point. Thank
be to residents.
Now, one thing that Anna did point out is that typically participation rate is low. So we're looking at, on a credit program, we're looking at everybody that qualifies, because again, the ratio credit, that's an easy one, right? You do the math, you know what their impervious area is, you know what their total area is. They either make it or they don't, and we assumed everybody that mathematically worked out, they got it. Well, if they don't apply for it, then they won't automatically get it. It could be, depending on, and I haven't looked at it, but maybe what their credit would be, it's not even worth applying for if it's a smaller piece of property. You know, again, that was one that we did in response to some of those larger agricultural properties up in the northern part of the parish that they had a barn in the middle of 30 acres. So it was to account for those specifically.
Yeah, Adam, just so that I understand the motion that we have on the floor, we're not saying that, ultimately we accept this credit program. We're basically just giving you all the guidance to go and flesh out a credit program based on these 6 criteria and further develop it, right?
That's correct. And of course, at any time, there could be a change.
Gotcha.
in
Okay, so I
anything.
want to make sure that we,
Yeah.
I think as a committee, I think we're ready to get past that question. So I'll call for the question and hopefully we could just have that done.
Okay. I can, so I can run through real quick. Do you want to hear
No.
the number? You want to call
Yes,
for the
please.
question?
Yeah.
Do you want to hear what now?
The numbers.
The
total
approximate
numbers.
amount of credits by each option, for each option.
So let me do something different here.
Okay.
we've got so many numbers and so many different options. If I recall, trying to synthesize down what we talked about over these last however many months it's been, we said we were going to do compliance. That's option one. We said we wanted to have maintenance included on this fee, correct? Yes. So that's either options 4 or 5 now. So aren't we really looking at only 4 or 5 when it comes to what we want to look at potential credits with?
Yes.
Does that make sense? So therefore, let's narrow down our focus of
Good.
what we're looking at to just those 2 that we've already sort of tentatively agreed we want to have compliance, some maintenance level, and some CapEx level.
That's it. That's good. And
Going to take basically $1.30 or $1.65 to get those.
that's what the experts are saying. That's what Black and Beach and others are saying, yes.
If we're all comfortable saying that we're going to have some level of maintenance
Yes,
and some level of CapEx.
yes. I agree. I second what he said.
Okay. I can, then I can give you some numbers here in a second. Okay, so options 4 and 5, if my very quick math is correct. Option 4, and again, this is assuming that all these people that qualify for
They
credits
apply.
apply for
They
them.
apply.
So I realize that these numbers
And
may be
they
high.
apply and they receive it.
They apply and they receive
Yeah.
the max amount. Now, this doesn't include the detention ponds and that kind of thing, so maybe we're close. Option 4, $4.2 million, rough numbers. Okay. That would be, so if we had to make that up, you're looking at 16 cents on the billing unit.
So that would drive it to like $1.46.
Right. Now, there's probably, that's very rough math.
Yeah.
We'd have to really run it back.
We are ballparking now.
That's what Anna does.
No, that's very helpful.
Option 5, the credits would be $5.4 million. And it would make a 20-cent adjustment on the billing unit.
$1.85.
All right? Because you're dividing by.
Which you still do, because they're going to jack up the per whatever price.
$8 a
I
month.
mean, so what's the point of it? Just keep it at $1.30.
But bring it up to the group, that's
I mean, if you,
Steve's got a good point, y'all, listen to him.
If you look at meeting 7, we looked at the example stormwater charges for residential, from the smallest to the larger. For $1.30 per billing unit, we're only looking from $57 to $120 a year. And for the $1.65 per billing unit, about $72 to $150 a year. It's not enough on an annual basis for anyone to get upset about.
Less than
I mean, it's
$10
a
a
few
month.
cups of coffee, you know, it's not a significant amount of money. We're arguing over something that doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I say we should just go ahead and approve it
I agree.
and move forward.
I agree. I mean, the big thing is going to be selling this to the community. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, we've spent 8 times 3, 24 hours at least, plus extra time on this, most of us. and some of us a lot more, studying this issue, and the experts over there have spent years doing it, and they've made the recommendation, and the next step is to engage and educate the major stakeholders in this community, get their buy-in, and then either the Metro Council votes on it, or they bring it to a vote of the people. But either way, there's gonna be a lot of educating that's gonna have to be done. And I agree with Steve, it's getting out there, and the difference between, what'd you say, 130 a month to me and you
Yeah.
versus 190 a month, or
Yeah.
$210, or excuse me, a year?
Yeah.
Not a month.
A
year.
year. It's annual,
year.
on an annual basis.
It's not gonna make a hill of beans.
And as long as we put
To
in
me,
enough
it's gonna be
flooding
understanding
control.
what the heck is a stormwater management program and why do I need it? Because that's still the biggest number one issue that we, as the Stormwater Coalition, face every day, is like, why do we need that? Like, we are number one in rainfall. We have not done this. We have got to get started, guys. We're 30 years behind the ball, right? So, anyway. off my
So we do have a motion on the floor.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'll provide a little pushback here, because I'll just tell you, you haven't met the taxpayers in Shenandoah or Old Jefferson or anywhere else. That is a significant amount of money to many of my constituents. So I'm not there yet on selecting the level of service. That's just my thoughts.
So we do have a motion on the floor for the credit program. And
But,
I thought we
okay,
settled that.
and I apologize profusely because I am just now walking into the discussion and Adam really did not brief me, not you. Adam
No, understood.
did not brief me as to exactly, I read through some stuff last night really quickly, but I did not realize we were taking a vote today. So I don't understand a credit program if all you're gonna do is jack up the per whatever cost, again, to make those same numbers work, right? So I don't understand, and it may be a discussion for later, but I mean, if at the end of the day, you're saying you need $7.7 million to do option 4, which is, comp, minimum level of service, and 200 million CapEx. Okay, if you're saying you need those dollars, I don't understand. So you're saying the 4.2 is going to be the credits, but yet you're going to have to jack up the price from $1.30 to whatever. I don't get the point. I can't.
so I think one
I don't get
major benefit is moving forward, it promotes green infrastructure, right? So it promotes people to have less impervious surface and more, maybe they put in pervious pavement instead of just pouring concrete. Maybe they have more green space than they would have before. So it promotes a reduction in runoff. It promotes a higher quality runoff moving forward as well.
And I understand that if, in fact, you're going to give them the reduced cost, but it sounds, what am I missing? Because it sounds like you're not giving them a reduced cost, and now they've got to spend money to get a credit that it didn't matter if they did it or not. Because now you're saying, I'm going to jack up the price because I got to make up that $4.2 million.
Well, I think that's just
Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, this is something's not making sense to me.
well, going up on it is just a function of if some of the larger contributors pay less, and we need a certain amount, then the billing unit's going to go up. I think, and then from an education standpoint, it continues to promote education on stormwater. That's why there's the education credit. The schools can start promoting this at a young age about why we need to protect our stormwater quality, why we need to do things a certain way.
But it's a 10% credit or whatever the credit is for education, whatever the number was, 25%, I'm not sure what it was. But you're saying, even though they're gonna get that credit for whatever the number is, 10, 25%, you're still gonna, that per unit cost is still gonna, now you're gonna raise it. So essentially, they're gonna be paying the same dollar amount, even though they've installed this green infrastructure, or even though they've done, they're doing the education piece, So to me, that doesn't incentivize me at all to do anything, because now I still got to pay the same amount. I don't understand. Or actually, I'm paying more.
It's not the same amount, because you're getting a credit over what everyone's paying. And it brings us back to what brought us to this whole process in the first place, which is MS4 and non-compliance with DEQ and EPA.
Right.
For 25 years, we've been in violation of the permit. They finally said, we're going to call you on it or take you to court, which brought this committee together in the fiasco we had last year. These credits are incentives to do things which bring us in compliance with our minimum control measures for MS4.
Right.
Which look good on the report, which is what we want to do. So the more credits we give to get more points to our benefit on the annual reports to DEQ, the better. In other words, instead of us having to do it, they're going to do it for us, we give them credit for it.
Okay, so let's just use one person as an example and pick anybody. Let's say Heck Management Company, okay? We are gonna go with option 4. And right now they're paying, they'd be paying $27,035.36 a year. And they do, I don't know, they do quality engineering to get down by a certain percentage. They're on, I don't know,
What number
no
are
page
they?
number. They're number 52.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter, pick anybody.
I just need to find the page.
They were just at the top of that particular page that I looked at. So what we're saying is let's say they get a 40% reduction because they've done all these wonderful things, but they still have 60% to pay, right? But now you're saying that the unit price is going from $1.30 to, what did we say?
$1.46.
$1.46. So now the 60% that they're still paying on goes up $1.46. They're not paying at $1.30 anymore. They're paying $1.46. So essentially, you're charging them the same amount. And I haven't done all the math, but it doesn't seem like you're saving them anything, and they're spending a bunch of money to do these things that are going to help, right? I understand that. I understand. And I'm not saying we don't need to do some of this stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the credit program from just a pure numbers standpoint is not making sense to me unless you actually give somebody the credit and keep the dollar amount what they would have gotten.
The same.
Right.
Yeah, her argument is very valid. So instead of trying all these monkey numbers here, just take $100. Say my
Right.
cost is $100, and you give me a 10% credit. My cost that I pay is $90
$90.
just if I take that 10%. But we've increased the billing rate. So is it truly now 100 or is it 115 now? And I don't understand the dynamic or the mechanics of how the credits work versus rolling back in an increased billing rate.
Right.
I think the
Turn the
mic's
mic on.
little gray button.
In total, it's going to work. I mean, communities, across the U.S. have credit programs because they do see the benefit of having those. And, every single parcel is not paying more because of the credit program. They really do help the system and the community. It just depends on the parcel, the amount of impervious area, the amount of the credit, how much the rate is going up, the participation rate. The math that you just walked through, that's the math that somebody might sit down and do and say, no, it's not worth applying. That's why I'm saying the participation rate is low, because people do the math and say, it's not worth it for me to maintain this facility. I don't want to do the credit.
Except if your goal is to do exactly what you said and to help us look better because we're not in compliance, then you're not meeting your goal. I mean, look, you talk about want to go explain this to people? I mean, seriously, look, I mean, if you're going to tell me I can apply for a credit, but yet the rate is going up, so the credit's not really what the credit was going to be, holy cow. For you council members, I would be very nervous about that.
You know, it's similar to like a low-income discount, say, on the water bill, right? If you qualify for that, you get a discount on your bill, but if you get a discount, the rate needs to go up to cover that. It's the same kind of logic for the credit program, that you qualify for the discount, but the rate has to go up to cover it, so you don't get the discount you originally thought you were getting, right, with the rates before we implemented the credit program. It's just,
Yeah. And look, Kelly, I agree with you. For us, $120 a year may not be a big deal, but there are a lot of people on fixed income. I mean, $120 can be a
I
lot.
understand that wasn't the argument we were making.
No.
We were talking about people like us that are homeowners, the difference between that we're gonna pay the 120, not,
Yeah.
I understand what you're
Right.
saying. I'm very sensitive to that. That's not what I'm saying. We're just saying the delta, and we're talking about option 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, it's selling the program
Yeah.
and getting buy-in for the program, which has been the biggest problem. It's not gonna be the $50 a year. It's gonna be the program in general. Whether it's $2 or $150 a year, it's selling the program. It's gonna be the challenge.
and maybe you start at a lower level of the program. Maybe you don't have the recommended O&M, or you don't have the higher CIP. You start there. Once you see what that participation rate looks like for the credit program, what the actual impact is, then maybe at some point you could move to a higher level of service or add more capital.
And I know that entities like BREC and LSU and Southern are going to be very tuned into this credit program. They've said it from the beginning. Corey said it in every meeting. And that's what other similar park services around the country do, because they have such incredible stormwater management programs really within our own park. It's a shining example, and our universities, shining example of stormwater management.
You got to keep in mind too that as this program progresses and more or fewer people apply for certain credits on certain properties, the amount of lag in revenue will vary through the year, and it has to be recalculated every year as to how much you can actually need to accomplish the program. So the rates are not set in stone, like for the next 30 years, that's what we're going to charge.
But that's not going to be an argument that a homeowner or a property owner necessarily is going to hear, because now you're saying, what you're saying now is, okay, this could vary year to year, and we could randomly almost change it on you. I'm just trying to come up with some kind of,
throw it all out the
you know,
window.
It's a utility, though. Stormwater management is a utility. It's like sewer. I mean, we don't have control over our sewer bill. You know, I mean, we do have a little bit more control over this just because the way it's set up in our community. But it's a utility. It needs to be managed professionally.
Yeah.
I think we're just not there. We're, as a community, we're not there. We don't realize how important it is. Or we don't want to pay for it.
We got to keep in mind what the goals here are. The number one goal which got us into this is MS4 noncompliance. We do not want to go to court and have them do what they did to us on the sanitary sewer, stick a big fine on us for the next 30 years, and we pay through the nose for it.
And
We don't
have
want
no
to do
control,
that.
Then we have no control.
And Baton Rouge has a serious flooding problem.
sure.
We found that out in 2016 and in the last flash flood. So we want to do something to solve that. That's what the people want, is the flooding. They don't care about MS4, but we got to comply with MS4 to keep the government off our backs. The credit program will help us comply with MS4 if we can convince enough people to participate in it. And by putting in the capital projects, we get the flooding program underway as approved by the Stormwater Master Plan. People will buy into that. They want to see that. So I think we're not going to have a problem selling it to the people if we present it the right way. The MS4 is just a very minor part of this. The capital projects are what we really want to go after.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, it's all the comments that everybody's making. One of the things that's been very difficult is that we have been working this thing piecemeal, and we see a little bit of this, and we throw some fairy dust on it. We get a little bit more of this, and then we say, "Oh, let's go back and do this." We haven't seen the big picture yet, and understand how this thing is going to be presented to the citizens of this parish. Are they going to vote on it or not? How are these credits going to be applied? Are we starting off with credits in place? And it sounds like we're going to be able to, they can go up or down on a yearly basis. I haven't seen the big picture yet, although we've been building it, and we have a much better understanding, because we've been doing this 8 times already, than anybody that's sitting out in the parish right now. And at some point, we just need to say, okay, let's do option 4. Let's give these 6 credit areas, put together a straw man proposal and say, if we did all of these, this is what it could potentially look like. And then we can start picking it apart and asking some very detailed questions. But right now, we're just building layer after layer. And that's probably the way we have to do it. But I don't understand the big picture to be able to answer some of the questions that folks are raising right now. But and I guess my guidance is at some point in time, we have to land the plane and get on with doing something. I know this has been, you guys have done a terrific job gathering the data, going back and getting more information so that we have it in front of us. We just need to propose something, see what the whole picture looks like, and then go back and start tweaking it. Because right now, you're hearing questions that, from my point of view, feel like, well, I really don't understand this, so I'm going to ask this question. But let's just propose something and move on. Get a picture, pick it apart. Then we can ask some questions. I still don't know if we're going to go to the folks and say, we're going to vote on it, or if this is just going to be a fee. We got to answer that legal question.
I would assume that it's going to the voters.
Okay.
I think that's the assumption I would say we should be under right now.
Okay.
Unless.
And so we got an election coming up here in April? Do we want to have it by then? What's the timeline? You know, the sense of urgency when we first started this with a 3-meeting kind of format, seemed like mid-year we needed to have the answer.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And we're continuing to go, and we're talking about, well, let's hold off for the holidays and regroup next year.
We solved for 2 years.
Huh?
Well, I won't say we solved, but a solution was put into place for 2 years for compliance, using the ARPA dollars.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
So the timeline and the urgency was pushed back a bit, yeah.
But not for MS4. I thought that was, if we don't do something now.
We figured out compliance. Go ahead, Adam. I think
Right. No,
you can say it more eloquently
you were on
than I
it.
can.
Yeah.
Compliance is covered for the next 2 years.
Okay.
At least.
That's the
But
first
then
time we've
we
made that statement here.
I know, I remember you said that, but I remember you also said, yeah, it's 2 years, but we have to start collecting that money a year in
That's right.
advance, so
We
it's
do.
available to
That's
be
right.
used, so we really only have a year. Right? That's what I heard.
Right. We haven't looked at putting money in place beyond that, but we've got the next 2 years covered.
But
Right.
we have to
Right.
collect it.
No, you're right. And
for
I
a
guess to
year
answer
to use it.
it's, I'd have to go back and look at the schedule, but we could not even, we couldn't make the April election right
Yeah,
now.
I do
It's
know the
beyond
schedule,
that.
but
Okay.
we would need to introduce by it has to be on the agenda for the first meeting in December to make
Right.
the April ballot. So there's just no way you're going to make April.
So then when would it be, for the fall?
In the fall election.
It'd be in the fall.
And we have to be,
For fall.
when does it have to be introduced to make it on the fall?
I couldn't tell you that.
That I don't know.
So, I mean, we have the 3 of y'all here, 3 Metro Council members. I mean, is it realistic that this committee could make a recommendation and y'all could present it and discuss it at the Metro Council meeting in time for a fall, to be on the ballot next fall?
Next fall.
Yeah, next fall. They've already said we can't do April, so that would be next fall.
If you're asking me logistically, is it possible? Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, however, one of the reasons that we wanted to do finding the existing money to get into compliance is so that we could build a robust program and have confidence that it's going to work. So I'd like to see us get that stamp of approval or that final, statement from the feds saying, yes, you're in compliance before we go to the voters. Because right now, I don't think the voters have confidence in our ability to administer a program. So that's what I'd like to see before we do that.
Well, I think one of the things that y'all have been talking about too is selling it to the voters, and that's going to take a significant amount of time. That's going to have to be factored in ahead of putting it on the ballot.
Agree.
So do we know what the 200 million CapEx is going to be spent for?
Yeah.
We do.
I mean,
It was
those projects are
so we-
outlined?
Right. So we have the Stormwater Master Plan, and what we asked HNTB to do was to prioritize the first 200 million for us.
Okay.
And we said, okay, and we said, give us $200 million worth of projects and $300 million worth of projects. So
Okay.
yes, the shorter answer is yes. There's a list of projects that would be included in the 200 million.
Could we maybe do a sidebar for Ann and anyone else that might want to meet with HNTB or Black and Beach and you and or whoever else and bring her up to speed on all of this that you guys have covered in these meetings?
Yeah, and I can definitely do that. That's fine. I can do that.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I'm trying to be mindful of the,
And it doesn't have to just be Ann. You
making
could ask
sure-
you could offer anybody to attend it that might want to.
we may do that and just,
We need to hear things over and over again, all of us.
no, and I just want to be mindful of that every meeting that we have, there's the ability for the public to be involved in some form or fashion. So we'd probably still have to, it could be an optional meeting, I guess, yeah.
One thing I like to say, we have to start developing somewhat of a Gantt chart and a timeline of what we're trying to achieve when we're trying to achieve it. Okay, I think that, the most productive time in the football game is doing a 20-minute drill. We got a goal in a certain amount of time. So what I'm hearing, we have things that we need, we don't know exactly when, but if there's a target that we're trying to meet, then it's probably a better chance that we can meet it. So setting up the stage at this meeting, we need to try to accomplish this, and by then we need to accomplish this. We talked about when we need to go to the voters. So, that has to be scheduled. It has to be put in some kind of timeline, and it has to be a goal of what we're trying to do in order to meet those particular obligations. So, I guess the experts can help do that so that when we come to, even when you send out your information about the meeting, the goal at this meeting is to achieve this. Okay, and so we have to thinking about here's what we're trying to accomplish in order to meet this date. I think that'll help.
I
That's
can
good.
do that. And as Councilman Hudson mentioned, there is a way to back into the election timeline, and we can do that.
And that would help with us knowing if we're gonna not meet for the next 2 months, that are we gonna be able to, by not meeting, meet that list of activities? We're pretty far along. I don't know what else we're gonna decide on right now. We've talked about everything. This was the last thing, wasn't it, the credits?
This is it. Yes, sir. This is
And
it.
so we're ready to sort of put this thing together, this straw proposal, and say, okay, here it would be, and then let's start picking it apart. Because there's things like, you said we're going to go for a vote, and anytime we make changes to the street fee structure stuff, does that just go before the Metro Council? Or, what's the mechanics? I don't know how this thing works. Every time we change the fees, do we have to go back to the voters? Those are the kind of things that we need to iron out, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, and then we need to say, okay, we're going to need a 2-month window for public engagement. Because the last time we went to the second meeting and this thing died as a fiasco on the first time. We can't have that happen this time.
Right.
And
I think
we're all here to help. And, we're quizzing you, and you've done a wonderful job of taking leadership, picking this thing up, overnight. So thank you for all your efforts, and both your members of the team in Black and Beach and stuff.
Thank you.
I want to commend
Thank you
all
for
those folks because they
your
have done a whale of a
patience.
job.
Yes.
And we're here to support you however we can, getting this thing across the goal line.
And Thank you. I believe the answer to the question about does it have to continue going to the voters, it all depends on what's on the ballot and how it's presented on the ballot. It can be presented on the ballot such that, especially if you're going to bond the program, then that fee is going to ramp up over time. So if that is chosen to be on there, we would have to write it such that the fee increases as we take out bonds. So yes, it can go up without
Have gone before the voters, yeah, agreed. So
we
what
just
else do
we just need to be very mindful in the way that it is written and put on the ballot.
So how far are we to follow up on Dwight's point? Dwight, you said you're not comfortable making any recommendation until we're in compliance? Is that right?
Well, until we get some, a further signal, I think would be the most appropriate way to say it, from the federal government about, our ability to be in compliance, yes.
So where are we in that process, and how far away are we from that?
I can answer the first part. We have submitted the permit to, everything was due September 15th. We submitted it on September 15th. It is now in the regulatory agency's hands for review. As far as timing, I don't know.
They don't tell you, we'll get back to you in 90 days, 6 months, and you have no idea?
No idea.
Okay, are we done?
Well, I guess
Are we done today? I thought I thought we were
there was a motion on the floor to proceed with.
I heard a whimper of yes. There was like a yeah,
Or
like that.
So the motion on the floor is to, the recommendation of the committee is for staff to continue developing the credit program based on the 6 categories.
Correct.
Second.
With
been
the
motioned.
understanding that,
Second.
Properly second?
are there any opposed?
Passes.
Okay. So we've got that. What I then heard you say is we need some proposal that we can then come back to you. So is that
Put all the pieces together.
so that
Based
we-
on option 4 and 5, right?
or whatever options you were looking at, but you wanted to make,
Well,
or I think I heard that you wanted to decide on something, and then, okay, if that's the recommendation, then you give us your presentation on that recommendation.
just for clarity, my motion's over, we voted on that, right? This is
I'm
something
sorry.
different?
Yes. this
Okay,
is
good
something
deal.
different. I'm sorry.
This is next.
I'm not,
So this is the big picture model of what we're doing,
mhm.
either on option 4 or 5. Is that what I heard?
But
Go ahead.
I don't want to limit to option 4 and 5 because in my mind, I think we should have an option to think about maybe in year 1 for the public, it is compliance and people understand the program and start paying 26 cents. And then in year 2, it's compliance plus some capital projects. And so people understand that in year 2, I'm actually going to pay an 85 cents. I think we could have some options to introduce it
Ramp it
and then
up.
ramp it up. And then by year 4 or 5, we're into a credit program. And we've got a graduated program that people understand. And they're seeing progress of the 200 or 300 million that we get to. And they understand that the Brex of the world are going to start. So I want that as an option for consideration, that we introduce it to the public, get everyone comfortable, give them confidence that we can manage a program, and then get into the business of, you're now at $1.30 or $1.46. There's a credit program, but you understand what you're getting for that.
Okay.
And
So-
you have a visual of what you're getting for that. So I didn't want to just limit it to 4 and 5, show us that on a spreadsheet and let's make a decision. I want to think that way, creatively.
But that would be the worst-case scenario. 4 or 5, fully implemented. And so you're talking about the implementation of this versus the total design of what you're going to see 4 years down implementation. So you could start off like you just, first year is compliance, second year is start throwing in some maintenance loan, and then after that, CapEx, and gradually increasing. But at some point, you're going to have to tell everybody, here's what the program is ultimately going to cost, and here's the guesstimated annual increase that you'd expect to see on your bills.
And as a resident and consumer, I would like to see that. I'd like to see 10 years out, and I'd like to know for planning purposes.
So,
Yeah.
so options 4 and 5, I think the only difference there is that options 4 and 5, those numbers that we're presenting, those are 2035 numbers. So that's with ramping up over a period of 10 years,
Yep.
give or take.
No, but you're starting at that $1.30 or whatever from day one. No?
No.
No, ma'am.
10
No,
years
ma'am.
in, 10 years
That's
out.
where you land in 2035. So now, the compliance piece was in there day one, and the O&M piece was in there day one, but there was a very small capital component in there on day one. Because we're not, with bonds, you can only bond out a certain amount at a time. We can't take out the whole 200 million on day one. Because there's some in laws that you got to spend X amount within a certain amount of time. So that part was going to be ramping up. I think the only difference is what we could, if you want to see a presentation this way, would be we could ramp up the O&M over the 10 years as well. And then that way it starts out and kind of stays lower, and both of them ramp up. That's something that we have not presented, if you want to
So I
ramp
mean,
them both up.
so you talk, I mean, there could even be kind of a pay-as-you-go and then a bond-out program on certain portions of the money, or are you talking about bonding it all out?
We're talking about bonding out the capital projects, but there was an O&M component of it where we need to collect more O&M dollars. And that we were saying, okay, if we're saying we need an extra 20 million in O&M, then we're going to start collecting that 20 million in O&M day one. I guess to Councilman Godey's point, maybe we say we're going to ramp that up over 5 years as well, something like that. And you start out with, I don't know, 6-8 million in O&M, and then you go up to the 20 million in O&M. We can present that. So again, if promote the confidence in the program.
Now, the MS4 compliance side, I know we talked about a couple of years to prove that we can actually perform compliance, right? That is being done now, right? We have the money to be able to do that now, so we should be able to get some buy-in by showing that can be done starting now because it's funded, right?
We are doing that now, yes, sir.
I'm just gonna beat a dead horse, but we're back in the place where I think we've been for several months now, and that is that we are all, whether it's at the front of our head or the back of our head, we're grappling with what the tolerance is, what the price sensitivity is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like the suggestion that we open up conversations with the top 10 charges, the top 10 people who would, businesses, entities who would be paying. I know some of those entities are here in in this room, but there are others that are not, and maybe don't even have a sense that this could be coming their way. And then I'm going to just say again, we've got to find a way to measure the sentiment of the voters and taxpayers in this parish to understand what fence we should be swinging towards.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I know Anna's got to go catch a flight. So I'm
Yeah.
Anybody else have any
So,
credit-specific questions? I want to make sure she doesn't miss her flight.
so building on what Rowdy said, and what you've also elaborated on, maybe you just start off with the minimal maintenance spending as our target versus the recommended. Start that off and build that up over time and prove the results. And then at some point in the future, you go back to the recommended level or increase to the recommended level. So we're gradually building it up. We're proving that we can deliver and having results, which should then reinforce the ability to increase this over time. That's just another iteration of what, you're looking at as a gradual increase over time. Which would just say, you do option 4 and gradually build it up over time. I think that's what it says.
And I think the second thing that he mentioned that I didn't mention the first time was maybe starting the credit program later on. And so for the folks that are very interested in the credit program, I guess I'd like your thoughts on that, because maybe at the 26 cent per billing unit range, maybe it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's
It's not
less,
overwhelming to them.
it's less of a burden
Yeah.
at that point. But when it gets to, when you start adding in some other things, then the credit program starts. Is that palatable?
Well, yeah, sure, look.
I'll tell you, this is going to be difficult for the school system at option 4 or 5, right? And we all know that there's declining enrollment in the school system and there's limited funding. And so this will be difficult for the school system. So credits, as long as we can pay a lesser amount, is what's going to be helpful. At 26 cents, $100,000 is very different than over $500,000, 600, 700,000. So
Okay. So if we started,
at a lesser.
because I think the thought was we start out at compliance only year one, if I heard that right. So, and then go up from there. So it sounds like you're okay if we don't have a credit program year one, if we're only talking compliance only at year one. I guess that's just the school systems.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We have to look at basically the amount of impervious area and what that basis, what hits the bottom line, right? I mean, if you look at deferred maintenance in higher education, I think LSU had $1 billion deferred maintenance need. Southern had $130 million deferred maintenance need. We got probably $8 million to that need at the last session. So, you look at those kind of needs, and any money to the bottom line helps provide facilities for educating kids, right? Young men and women. So
Right.
I think we'd be willing to have some discussion on how we move that forward. But it is an economic impact to the university.
Okay. Orlin, any thoughts on that? Good, okay.
I'm in agreement. The option 1 and the minimum cost is, $5,700, and for BRCC grows to option 5, which is kind of, $36,000. We would be interested in a credit program at that level, but again, we're not at the level of LSU and Southern and East Baton Rouge parish schools in total impervious area. So,
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
not as impactful to BRCC.
Yep. So is that a recommendation to come back to you with a beginning at compliance only, ramping up, and then also come back to you with a timeline, back into a timeline of when do we absolutely need to wrap this thing up?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe show us, I mean, build out option 4 as well, so we have a comparison. And that
Okay.
might even help if and when we go to the members of the public, so by saying, look, we did a thorough analysis and here's one option. Anyway, so yeah, throw a few scenarios at us, but that graduated one was what was interest to me.
Okay.
Please.
You're welcome.
And then in the meantime, who can meet with the top 10? I know some of them are covered because they're in this meeting, in the top 10. But let's say, flush it out to the top 15, there are plenty of them that have not sat through 8 meetings, and they're not going to understand.
What? Yeah, I can, well, Exxon, so Greg Bowser is with the Louisiana Chemical
Right.
Association. So that, I'll have to reach out to him and find out if he's had any one-on-ones
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
with Exxon
Yeah.
or any of the industry. And then the others we'll have to take a look at.
I'd probably go to the top 20. And then, what happened? I mean, I don't know. We can talk about this next time, but what happens if the other 10 don't agree? And what happens if it's not voted down? Then what happens? How do we pay for it?
I'll have to answer that.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
don't have
I'm
that
not,
right
you
now.
can't answer all the questions, but it'd be nice to have someone who could, at one of these meetings, address that. What happens?
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Good meeting. Thank you. Very good points.
All your endeavors.